All right, welcome back. Our last session is a pre-recorded video on optional resources that you could use for the Retail Flexible Funding Model by Alicia Johnson, Retail Food Specialist in the Office of State Cooperative Programs. Please post your questions in chat while the video is playing. And Amy, could you please start the video?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alicia Johnson, and I'm a retail food specialist with the Food and Drug Administration. And I'm so happy to round out our workshop today with some optional resources that can help you, our state, local, territorial, and tribal partners, navigate the retail flexible funding model. Now, as you've already heard today about how to put together a comprehensive strategic improvement plan, as well as a project implementation plan. And you've also heard from our partners at NEHA about the application portal. Now I get to review some of the goodies that our national retail food team has worked to put together to assist you. So some of the things I'll be going over in our session today. The first thing I'm going to show you are the optional templates, which you've already seen in action during sessions 1 and 2 of the workshop. Then I'm going to move on to cover the self-assessment verification audit gap analysis tool, or the SAVA tool, which is located on our program standards page. Next, I'm going to move to provide a demonstration of an optional retail flexible funding model plan generator, which is a system that's based in Excel to help you draft comprehensive strategic improvement plans, project implementation plans, all with the click of a button, as well as track some of your work in the standards. And then lastly, I will talk briefly about Food Shield, our resource center where jurisdictions can share materials and learn from and support each other. So the first resource I want to cover, you already saw in action during session 1 in the workshop today, and that is the CSIP, or Comprehensive Strategic Improvement Plan template. And as mentioned in this session, that template is just an example of how you can construct your own plan. It gives you ideas of what to include. It's just intended to serve as a resource. You can use it directly if you choose, or you can use it for inspiration to develop a plan that works for you. There is no right way to develop a CSIP. The biggest thing to think about is how you can approach the standards holistically and set goals for improvement for your jurisdiction. The next optional resource I want to talk about, you also have seen in action today, and that is the Project Implementation Plan, or PIP template. Again, this is just an example that you can use. You can change this format or develop something that best meets your needs. Also, as you may recall from our second workshop presentation, there are actually 2 formats for this particular resource. There's one that was used throughout the demonstration in session 2 that actually uses a Gantt chart. That's the one that you're seeing on your screen currently, where it takes multiple years and breaks them down by quarter. This one's best for larger projects that span multiple years. The other option, which they showed you in this session, includes start and completion date columns, and that may be a better fit for projects that are intended to be completed more in like 1 year. Now, both of these optional templates are available on Pathable. They're also available on the retail grant page with NEHA. You can also get them through your retail food specialist. Now I'd like to move on to the Self-Assessment Verification Audit Gap Analysis Tool, or the SAVA tool. This one is optional for use by any enrolled jurisdiction, and it can help them track incremental progress with individual standards. It helps jurisdictions identify elements completed, also some gaps with some unmet standards, and really the best way to approach this is through a demonstration. But first, I'm going to show you one location where you may be able to find this resource. So one location where you can find the SAVA tool is on FDA's website for the Voluntary National Retail Food Regulatory Program Standards. And if you scroll down about a third of the way, you will notice a section that says information about enrolling and participating in the retail program standards. And the 5th bullet down in this section is the Self-Assessment Audit Verification Summary and Gap Analysis tool. If you click on this link, the file will download to your computer. You can also find this resource on the retail grant page through NEHA. You can find a link on Pathable, and of course, you can always reach out to your retail food specialist. Okay, so let's do a demonstration of the Self-Assessment Verification Audit Gap Analysis tool. So some of the first things you're going to notice when you open the file, The first tab is an instruction sheet. I'm actually going to walk you through how to use the tool here in just a moment, but if you open it up and you need some additional reference, that's the place to go. The self-assessment summary sheet we're actually going to end with, and that is a very nice feature for this tool. And then you'll notice that there's a tab, one for each of the 9 standards. Now, when you open up one of the standards tabs, you'll notice that this will look familiar. This will look like the worksheets that you use in the workbooks to complete your self-assessment. And what I've done for the sake of our example is gone ahead and entered in some information for a fictional jurisdiction. That way you can see how all of the pieces work together. So the way that this would work, you can feel free to complete your self-assessment in this tool, or you can move over any manual written work that you've done on paper into this tool so you can keep track of things over time. Either way is fine. You would handle this tool just like you would a self-assessment on paper. You'd go to the appropriate tab for the standard which you want to assess. You'd reach each of the sub-elements, and then depending on whether or not you meet them, in column C, titled Essay Met, you'd click on the box and notice that there's a down arrow to the bottom right. You'd click on the down arrow and then select yes or no, depending on whether or not you meet that sub-element. Now, a feature I want to point out, which I think would be very helpful for you, especially if you're moving towards a comprehensive strategic improvement plan, is to use column D, or the self-assessor's comments section. So if you say, yes, you meet a standard and you know the document that's going to help show conformance, write down that document. If you're using a database to store some information that you know will help support conformance with the standard, write that down. If you get to a section where, let's say, you do not meet the standard, make notes on what you're missing. So then that way you don't have to go through and reassess the standards when you come back to work on them. You know immediately what gaps you need to address and where you need to pick up. So, like I said, I've entered in some information for all 9 standards to give you an idea of how this summary sheet would work. When you go to the summary sheet, you'll notice a few things. The far left-hand column lets you know whether or not you meet the standard in its entirety. And for our fictional jurisdiction, you can see that they meet standard 3. On the far right-hand column, you'll see standard elements. This section breaks things down by sub-element based on the information you put in the tabs for all 9 standards. What this will do is show you your gaps in red underline. Anything you meet is black with strike through. The middle column, which says progress, is a unique feature to this tool. What it does is it gives you an idea of where you're currently at. If you meet a standard, it will say self-assessment met and then provide a date. If you haven't met any of the elements of the standard, it will tell you no elements met. And what's unique about this is that as you work through and make incremental progress, these numbers will change. So you can not only keep track of it, but you can also show decision makers. And this can also give you an idea of maybe where you want to put your department's priorities. So for example, this jurisdiction is very close on several of the standards. They may want to prioritize one of those first because they may be closer to meeting it. The next resource I want to cover is actually a generator that we built off of the SAVA tool. So you'll see some of the features that we just showed you with the SAVA gap analysis tool in action with the retail flexible funding model plan generator. Now, what the generator does is it takes the SAVA tool an extra step. It not only helps you track progress in the standards over time, but it can actually help you build your comprehensive strategic improvement plans, project implementation plans, create timelines, and actual budgets. So the Retail Flexible Funding Model Plan Generator is really something that we created to help you, our state, local, territorial, and tribal partners, not only assess the gaps from your self-assessments, but again, as I mentioned, build some of those plans for long-term planning, as well as put together the pieces to help apply through the Retail Flexible Funding Model portal. A few things I want to point out before we dive into our demonstration. I want to talk about what this generator does. Like with the rest of our resources we pointed out today, it's completely optional. This is not a required form in any way. The worksheets that are in this system are going to pull from self-assessment data, decreasing your administrative burden, and it's going to add some additional functions to help you with the standards. So these sheets overall sort data, they help you set goals, they provide example action items and deliverables for your CSIP, all of which are customizable to meet your jurisdiction's needs. And while there are a lot of features in this generator, you do not have to use all of them to get some value. Now I want to talk a little bit about how this workbook works. So everything is connected. That's an important thing to keep in mind. So anytime you update your self-assessment, an action item, a time frame, or a deliverable, everything actually updates across the workbook either automatically or with the simple click of a button. And this will help save you time and also prevent some errors. I also want to cover what the generator doesn't do. So this workbook, while it's an excellent resource, will not replace Form 3958. So anytime you report meeting a standard, have a standard verified, or complete a full self-assessment, please send your retail food specialist Form 3958. And that holds true as well for the SAVA gap analysis tool that I just covered a little bit ago. Anytime you report meeting a standard, have it verified or do that self-assessment. It's a really good idea to connect with your retail food specialist. Another thing is that this workbook doesn't replace the grant portal, doesn't guarantee funding. However, this will help put together some of the required pieces that you will need to actually apply through that portal. Some things that I want you guys to recognize with the generator, a little bit of the anatomy, if you will. So the first thing that you'll notice is that there's a landing page for the retail flexible funding model. Everything to the right of this page is the generator. Now to the left-hand side of this landing page, you'll notice some tabs that should look very familiar. They look like the SAVA tool that we just went over and did a demonstration of. And if you think that this looks the same, you are absolutely correct. The base for the generator was the SAVA tool. So we'll walk through how that ties in here in just a moment. But the reason why I wanted to point that out is that any of the tabs to the right of the landing page actually have a description section on the landing page. So if you want to know the functions of any of the pages, if you want some helpful hints for how to make them work, go ahead and come to the landing page, look under descriptions of worksheets. What you'll notice is that if there are any important notes to make sure that you maintain functionality, those will be in red, and any tips for success will be in bold. Now, the third section of this landing page is also important. So I'm going to walk you through how to use the generator today. However, there are written instructions right on this landing page that will help you. So if you need to come back to them later, they're available for you at any time. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do with the generator is give your self-assessment information onto these sheets. So we just walked through how to use the SAVA tool. The same steps would apply. You would come to the standards pages. You would enter in your self-assessment information. And again, I strongly encourage you to use this column for adding in any comments or notes as you've gone through your self-assessment. Now, if you're someone who is just now doing your self-assessment, you're welcome to do it directly into the generator. If you have done your self-assessment manually, you can enter in the information like we showed on our previous demonstration. Or if you're a jurisdiction that's used a version of the SAVA tool to do your self-assessment, no worries. You can transfer that information into the generator very easily. You can either go to your source file where that self-assessment information is and copy and paste over by cell or groups of cells, or you can copy and paste information over sheet by sheet. How that works is you would open up your source file with your self-assessment information. You'd click on the upper left-hand corner of that sheet to highlight, and then you'd copy that information. And then once you've copied the information from your source file, you would come into the generator sheet, make sure that you pick the correct tab for the standard you're copying in. You'd click the upper left-hand corner to highlight in the generator, and then you would paste over all of your information. And so that way you can speed things up and transfer information over sheet by sheet. Once you have all of your information in for all 9 standards, I strongly encourage you to look at the self-assessment summary page like we looked at with the self-assessment gap analysis tool a moment ago, just to make sure that all of your information transferred over correctly. Now, before we go any farther with our demonstration, I want to show you some key things with the CSIP page. First off, when you initially open the generator, you're actually going to see some data hanging out on this file. And the reason why is the generator always has to be working on some data in order for it to work. So we actually had some placeholder data in here, just kind of keeping the tool warm for when you actually enter your data. Once you run the generator, it will actually all be replaced with all of the information based on your self-assessment. So don't worry if you see information in this page when you initially open it up. Everything will be replaced with your information once the generator button is clicked. Some other features I want to point out before we move forward with the demonstration. When you look at the CSIP page, there are some important things to note. First, if you look at the left-hand columns, you will see that they are color-coded. Each standard has its own color scheme, and that is important when we get to the timelines, which I'll show you here in just a little bit. So for the timelines, you will actually be able to scroll through and visually see how all of the 9 standards are stacking together. So you can get a visual representation of the work that you've planned across all 9 standards. And those colors help you best understand and visualize how you've planned that out. Another key feature I want to point out is this button to the upper left-hand corner. On the CSIP page, as well as all of the project implementation plan pages, there's a button that will take you back to the RFFM landing and instructions section. So if at any point you need to know next steps, or you're confused, or you'd like some hints, go ahead and click that button and it will take you back to our resources on the landing page. Now, a really important thing that I want you to note, you'll see several columns here with cells that are in gray. On the CSIP, that is column C through H, as well as column M. These cells have functions built into them. They also have important links to different sections of this workbook, and we do not want those to be edited or it could affect the functionality of the generator. So it's really important not to delete or edit any of the contents in the cells that are in gray. These are protected by data validation, and if you click on them, you'll actually get a little warning that tells you not to edit or delete the contents. If you accidentally type over something, no biggie, you'll actually get a do not edit warning and you can just click cancel and it'll go back to its original data. However, if you hit delete or backspace, you may or may not get that secondary backup warning. So just be very careful when you're working with the cells that are in gray. Now that said, any cell that's white, you can actually edit and manipulate with absolutely no impact on the functionality of the generator. So the way that the generator works is once you enter in your self-assessment information and you click the button to run the generator, which I'll show you here in just a moment, it'll actually go through, sort through all of the information you've given it. It will bring over any unmet sub-elements from your self-assessment. It will generate recommended action items and deliverables based on that data, as well as pull in some organizational steps to help you approach each one of the standards. Now, these recommended action items and deliverables are incredibly detailed, and we understand that jurisdictions may not want to go to that level of detail, and that's okay. We wanted to provide a level of detail that may help jurisdictions who may be unfamiliar with strategic planning or may not know the best way to approach some standards, so they had a place to start from. However, if you have a game plan for your jurisdiction on how you want to approach things, you can take or leave whatever recommended action items and deliverables you want. In fact, with this, you can actually delete entire sections and type in what you want and start from scratch. A key thing I just want you guys to note is please do not delete any rows until you're absolutely done coming up with your comprehensive strategic improvement plan. And if you want to play it on the safe side, I'd encourage you not to delete any rows at all. It's okay to have sections that are blank, but to maintain the integrity of the generator, it's best to leave all of these things in place. Some things I'm going to show you in just a moment with the demonstration. There's columns for starts and end dates. This will help actually populate your timelines. You can also assign team members and main contacts. And a really neat feature is the status column all the way to the end, which can have some reporting functionality. So let's go ahead and pause and bring up the generator with some of the information from our fictional jurisdiction. Okay, so I've went ahead and I've added in some self-assessment information for a fictional jurisdiction, and I wanted to bring you right to the self-assessment summary page to let you know where they're at with certain standards, because that will help you understand how some parts of the generator tie together. So as you can see, with standard 1, they don't meet any elements. Standard 3, however, they meet in its entirety, and that's going to be important when we get to maintenance. So let's go ahead and click on the CSIP tab. The first thing that we're going to want to do, and this is true for any time you enter in self-assessment information. So whether it's your initial addition of your self-assessment data or anytime you update a self-assessment, you need to run the generator on this page so that you have the most current information coming from your self-assessment. And there's a couple ways to run the generator. One way is to go to the data tab at the top and then click reapply. The other way to do it is to add a quick access toolbar button, which I have done here at the top. And the way that you can do that is hover over reapply, right click, and then click add to quick access toolbar. I encourage you to do that so that each time you run the generator, it's nice and easy. So let's go ahead and click the button. What we've done is we've sorted through, it's run its functions, and it's brought over all of our information from the self-assessment and provided some recommended action items and deliverables. So the next step, let's just assume that this jurisdiction likes the action items and deliverables. They've already reviewed it. They've made any changes that they need to. We start with the work planning section, and that's where the start and end dates become handy. So let's say, for the sake of our example, that we want to start working on things starting October 1st, 2021. And let's say, just for the sake of our example, that that's going to apply to all of these initial parts of standard 1. And as you notice, an easy way to just carry on down the data is to grab the bottom right-hand corner and pull it down, and it will fill that information down the column. And then let's say for our example end date, we want to do this by December of this year. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and pull that down using the bottom right arrow. And you'll notice it actually calculates some duration, and that will tie to our timeline here in just a moment. Now for this jurisdiction, let's say they know that Taylor and Ed are going to be the primary team members, and that department manager Vicki is going to be the main point of contact. We'll go ahead and add those guys in here. And again, carry those items down the column. And now let's take a look at the status section. And this status bar has multiple functions which you can take advantage of. First off, when you click on it, you'll notice that there's a drop-down box that appears on the bottom right. What you will do is if you click on it, you'll see that there are 4 different options: completed, in progress, not started, and needs attention. So for the sake of our example, let's say they've already created their project management team, even though they hadn't till December, they're going to mark that completed. For the next step, which is reviewing the gaps in the self-assessment, let's say they've started it, but they haven't finished it. So we're going to mark that in progress. And then for the remaining steps here, we're going to go ahead and say that they haven't started them. And again, carry that down the column. Now, the reason why this is an important feature is that not only can you visually track where each of these action items are, but you can also do a quick reporting function. So if you see this button here at the bottom right-hand corner of the title bar, if you click, you'll see that you can select for each of the different options. So let's say you need to do a report for your Board of Health and update them on all of the things you've completed in the standards. All you need to do is select completed, click OK, and now you have a quick report on all of the items you've achieved. Same thing, if you need to generate a report for all the things that need attention, maybe those things that need higher priority, all you need to do is switch the check mark to needs attention and click OK, and you'll get a report on those items as well. Now, if you select all, you'll get your full comprehensive strategic improvement plan. Now, another important piece when it comes to tracking progress is, let's say we actually planned on starting this September 1st, and that we actually wanted to have this action item done by the end of September. Whenever you get within a month, the end date will turn red to let you know you're coming up on a deadline. Now, for the most part, these timelines are completely set by you, the jurisdiction, and you guys can extend or play around with them however you would like. However, if there are timelines where, let's say, it's either tied to your funding or it's really important for something that you guys have going on internally, this will at least give you a warning that you're coming up on something. And what you can do is you can then change this to needs attention. And again, you can pull a quick report and come up with all of the items that you need to switch gears on. Okay, so let's say that this jurisdiction is now done with their comprehensive strategic improvement plan. They've filled in all the information, they're satisfied with the action items and deliverables. Now we can go ahead and take a look at what their work planning looks like. And this is where all of those dates and those color schemes come into play. This Gantt chart for each of the standards is automatically generated based on the timeline data entered into the CSIP. And one of the reasons why this is important is that each of these standards are their own Gantt chart. So that makes it easy to export, to copy, paste, print, turn into a PowerPoint, however you want to use these timelines. The other thing that's important to note is that this top bar here, it all has the same scale, and the scale is by quarter. So that means when you scroll through all of the Gantt charts, these are actually stacked with the same timeline. So you can see if you are crowding in too much work over several standards that may be really hard for you to achieve. And if that's the case, you can always come back to the CSIP, and let's say you wanted to adjust something, it actually will automatically change, as you just saw, and be reflected in these timelines. Now, something that's important I just want to point out is that for any standard that you meet in its entirety during your self-assessment, it will not show up on the CSIP template. So if you see a gap here, don't worry, just double check your self-assessment summary. If you meet that standard, that's the reason why. And that standard actually gets shifted to maintenance because it's not captured in your comprehensive strategic improvement plan because it's something you've met. So that's how the timelines work. And again, as you can see, all of these are stacked, so it makes it really easy to kind of visually digest. And again, you can make really simple changes in the CSIP to adjust those timelines to something that'll work for you. So now that you've gone through, you've done your CSIP, you've done your work planning, now it's time to start thinking about funding and those project implementation plans. So for the sake of our example today, we see that standards 1 and 2 would fall right within that initial funding window. So let's say a jurisdiction here wants to apply for funding for standard 2. So they'd come to the conformance and improvement project implementation plan. The first thing I want you to note is see how many columns are in that gray uneditable color. That is because you did the majority of the work during your CSIP. And instead of making you carry over and repeat steps, we just connected the CSIP to this conformance and improvement project implementation plan. That way, once you select the items you want to work on and ask for funding, all you need to do is fill in the resources needed for which you're asking for funding. So let me show you how to do that. I said for the sake of our example, we're going to ask for funding to complete standard 2. What you do is you'd click the down arrow on the sub-element box. The easiest thing to do is deselect everything. That way, all you need to do is come down the list and pick all of the items that go with the elements for which you're asking for funding. And I'm also going to go ahead and just throw in all of the initial work steps that go with standard 2 prep work. And then you click OK. And then as you see, this brings over all of the information specific to your funding request. Now, if there's anything that you want to change as far as like the timelines, recommended action items, and deliverables, yes, this isn't editable here. No problem. Go back to the CSIP, make the changes in the fields, and then this will automatically generate. Now, something to keep in mind, and I strongly encourage you to do this, anytime you come to either the CSIP page or the PIP page, it's a good idea just to hit the generator button just to make sure that it has the most current information before you move forward. So with the conformance and improvement PIP, again, you'd go ahead and pick the elements that you want to work on. You enter in the resources needed. I started doing that here for the sake of our example. So, you know, they're asking for staff time, they're asking for printer and printing costs, and potentially some travel. And then with the timeline here, it's actually going to create a timeline specifically just for you for this budget request. Now, let's say you want to ask for funding just for maintenance. And if you remember when we looked at the self-assessment summary page, there was a standard 3, which they met in its entirety. So if you meet any standards completely, you can ask for maintenance funding, and that would be through the maintenance project implementation plan. Again, you'd run the generator, make sure that you have the most current information. Then you'd come to the sub-element drop down, select all of the elements that apply to your maintenance funding request and click OK. And then note here, the gray columns, there's fewer of them than in the other project implementation plan. And that's because you didn't do the work for the maintenance proposal in the CSIP. So here it's the same approach as with the comprehensive strategic improvement plan. You will still get recommended action items and deliverables, and you can edit, take or leave whatever you'd like. And then you complete the remaining columns just like you did with the CSIP, and then fill in any resources needed for maintenance. With maintenance, you would also get a timeline generated specifically for this funding request. And then there's one more project implementation plan here, and it is one for complete manual entry. So if you do not find a project implementation plan that meets your needs, or if let's say you're asking for funding for something like completing another self-assessment or training or a special project, it may not work very well to go through the confirmation and improvement or the maintenance PIP. So you can come to this sheet, you can type in all the information you want. There is still a return to instructions page if needed. The only thing that's really automated are the timelines, again, based on the start and end date. It works the same way as the rest of the pages, and you would get a timeline generated here based on the data that you enter. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about are the budget resource sheets that are in here. There are 2 one-year grant sheets and then a single 3-year budget sheet. Again, you can take or leave these. It depends on what your needs are. Let me just show you what one of the 1-year ones looks like, and then I'll show you some of the differences between this one and the 3-year. So when you get to the budget page, really what it's asking you to do is to start with entering in your tasks or deliverables in the first column. So whatever deliverables, action items, etc., that are pertinent to your funding requests would go in this first column. If you're asking for funding to offset any staff time, you would enter in the hours associated with each task and deliverable here. And we did a neat function where all you need to do is enter in the hourly rate once for each different position for what you're asking for funding, and it will calculate it all the way through. That way you don't have to keep typing the same amount over and over again. Now, the remaining budget items are done in pairs, and you can see these color coded here. It's done in units and then unit costs. And we picked the most common ones that people would ask for funding. That includes software, hardware, inspection supplies. There's a variety of things that are shown here in blue, which may deal with training or travel costs. However, we understand that we may not capture all of the types of funding for which you may request support. So we do have some pairs at the end here in green. You can actually click on these boxes and edit the contents and then put in the unit and unit cost for those customized options. And of course, this wouldn't be a spreadsheet without some sort of calculation feature. So at the very bottom here, you can see where it will total per funding request type. And then if you scroll all the way over, you will see it will total per task. It will give you a grand total for the 1-year project. And there's also a column here where you can add some additional comments or provide additional breakdown. So for example, if you are asking for funding to buy inspection supplies for 4 inspectors at $200 per inspector, you can tell them how the breakdown of the $200 would work. Now, the difference between this sheet and the 3-year budget sheet is pretty simple. We wanted to make sure that you didn't have to keep entering information over and over and over again, understanding that tasks or deliverables may be carried out over 3 years. So when you open the sheet, you'll notice a lot of similarities to the year 1 sheet. However, there are some boxes here in orange. Those are just placeholders. You don't need to enter any information in. So if, let's say, you're doing training across 3 years, you could put in the action item here and then do the breakdown for this action item over the 3 years across the budget sheet. And the way that this would total is, again, you would go column by column to get the different subtotals for each of the funding types. Again, on this sheet, you don't have to enter in hourly rates over and over again. You do still have that functionality that I showed you on the first sheet. And then at the end here, you will actually see where it'll total per task across the 3 years. It will total across the task per each year. You'll get subtotals for each of your 3 years and then a grand total in gray. So we're excited about this option. Please contact your retail food specialist if you're interested in this. And we also have a recorded video tutorial, which you can get access to, which will help you walk through step by step everything that I just covered. So you don't need to remember everything today. And again, there is some instruction sheets and information at the beginning of the RFFM landing page. So the last resource that I wanted to cover today is Food Shield. Now, Food Shield is a site that's designed for all of our federal, state, local, territorial, and tribal partners, as well as some non-regulatory associations that are assisting with the retail program standards. And what this site does is it allows for collaboration, support, and file sharing, where jurisdictions can support other jurisdictions and share ideas. So let's go ahead and take a look at this page. When you first get into Food Shield, what you'll notice is that there are folders, one for each of the 9 standards. There's also some information on self-assessments, as well as our retail seminars. Once you click in to any of the files, you'll notice that fellow jurisdictions have uploaded information, and these are to help you get started. So if you're a newer jurisdiction and you want some ideas, you want some assistance on how to get started, Food Shield is an excellent resource so that you do not have to start from scratch. Another really good thing about the Program Standards Resource Center is that it gives you information for the folks who have done some of this work and who are experienced in the standards. And if you click on their name, name, you can actually get some contact info. So this will also help you collaborate and network with fellow jurisdictions, and you can support each other while you're working on the standards. So let me just review before we close up here where you can get a lot of these resources. So the optional CSIP and PIP templates that I went through right at the beginning, which you saw in action during sessions 1 and 2 of our workshops today. Again, those you can find on Pathable. You can get them on NEHA's retail grants page, and of course your retail food specialist. The SAVA gap analysis tool, which I showed you a quick demonstration of, you can find the link to that on Pathable, again on NEHA's retail grants page. You can find it on its homepage at the Voluntary Retail Program Standards site by FDA. And again, you can get things through your retail program, your retail food specialist. Now, the plan generator that I did a demonstration of just a few moments ago, that one you have to go directly to your retail food specialist at this time. And then foodshield.org, that sharing site that is really supportive of jurisdictions, helping jurisdictions. You can contact your retail food specialist to get access. You can also create an account on foodshield.org and simply request access to the workgroup Retail Food Program Standards Resource Center. The last thing I just want to point out is it's super important to find your specialist. There are links to finding your specialist. If you scroll all the way down on the Pathable site, you can click and it will take you to this directory right here. Please feel free to reach out to your retail food specialist, not only about any of these resources, but about the program standards or any way that we can help support your program. I thank you for your attention, and we can take some questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Would you like to, there are a few questions in chat. A lot of them looks like they have been addressed. Was there anything in particular that you wanted to state?
No, Tracinda, I think I captured all of the questions, but I'll certainly go through and make sure that I cover anything in a Q&A document for later. Again, I'm really sorry that the video is quite blurry. I think it's because we had so many people on the line that the bandwidth was just stressed, but there will be access to the video later. And your retail food specialist does have access to a high quality step-by-step tutorial for anyone who is interested in that generator. So if you feel like you weren't able to see some things, don't worry about it. There will be some resources available later.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alicia. That was fantastic. Then this really concludes our workshop. The seminar video should be posted on the website by the end of the week. We also have an evaluation for today's workshop, so that will be posted in the chat as well. We'd love to hear from you. We also have a stakeholder evaluation for the upcoming seminars and how we move forward in 2022 and beyond. So we really do appreciate your feedback. Thanks to all the presenters in the audience this week. We hope you found the seminar worthwhile and educational. Stay safe and healthy and have a great evening.